Welcome. So I'm going to be making a short presentation here, and just generally talking to you, talking to myself, talking to Mala, which you see on the bed there. And I'm going to show you very quickly, I want to show you a poster that I made that's going to give you a breakdown and hopefully an understanding of how it is that COVID-19, which now finally is at least rationally being linked to this Wuhan lab, but which I tell you, as my personal belief of it, it's a bioweapon. That's my view of what it is. And I will explain to you why it is that I believe that that's the case. Now, mind you, under international law, and I'm no expert on international law, but from my understanding of it, bioweapons are illegal for all sorts of reasons. And that would make their use as a weapon of war monumentally controversial, and it would bring about universal condemnation. There'd be a lot of political consequences to it. And for that reason, you wouldn't want to do so in the open. Instead, if you were to do it, you would want to make it look like a leak, like an accident. And if this bioweapon just also happens so coincidentally to coincide with another unconventional, truly a weapon of mass destruction in a very real sense, which is the psychological warfare usage of the feedback loop phenomenon of schismogenesis. So through this channel, I've been working to raise your awareness, your consciousness, your familiarity with the concept of schismogenesis, which I brought to your attention produces autism, and I've explained precisely how it does this. So that's going to help us out in understanding how it is that schismogenesis is aided by this virus of COVID-19, insofar as the effects that it has produced beyond the most immediate things we might notice, which are medical symptoms and conditions. But that's the wrong focus, because the purpose of the weapon is to make the first one more effective. So the end game is schismogenesis. I know you guys can't read this from afar, so I'm going to go down through it for you. So that the end game is schismogenesis. This is the weapon. This is the weapon being used against us, because what it does is it breaks you down psychologically in a slow but steady, sure manner, that as it overcomes you, you become more sluggish in your thinking. You become less capable of critical thought. You become more anxious. You get all sorts of detrimental effects, which we will go into, but they all come about through schismogenesis. And once you're in this process, it's hard to make your way out of it, because your thinking, which is the thing that could help you out of it, is compromised by it. So it's a feedback loop, and it amplifies itself. So in order to psychologically break down an entire country, so if you want to overtake a political adversary on the world stage that you just cannot confront militarily because it's impossible. It's a complete impossibility for the United States to be overtaken through military force. What is not impossible, though, is to provoke catastrophic disunity from within so that it internally collapses. So that's the aim of schismogenesis. It's to create a civil conflict in this country that spirals out of control by literally compromising the thinking of the entire population through this process of schismogenesis, which is aided greatly through COVID-19 through its effects, which we'll go through right here. But that being said, this is my personal view of it. So I don't have the intelligence reports that our leaders do, which I will bring something to your attention in that regard. And there's always information that we're all missing. We're all always missing one piece or another. But what I've been able to piece thus far has been the answer to all these things. So that's why when you see me making a video, not seemingly, but only in just in part, bragging about solving autism, that's not merely to say, guys, hey, give me the credit for solving autism. It's, hey, I need the stage. I need the platform that comes with having done that. I need the spotlight that should entitle me to, so that then I can bring these other issues to the world stage. This right here is what is being used to destroy this country. So you will not hear that from any politician. You will not hear that from, that comes to this poster. So let me hang up this one real quick and you'll see what I mean. So there's another one I made, and I'll let you see that close, but I got to read it myself. So I'm going to give you a breakdown of this one first. So it says here, Schismogenesis. It says, and this is a quote from, this is the source, the U.S. Army War College Quarterly, Parameters Volume 48, Number 4, Parameters Winter of 2018 through 2019, and the date of the article is December 1st, 2018. December 1st, 2018, this is when the Pentagon finally came out and warned on schismogenesis. So why you want to keep that in mind is because I've been warning you ahead of that. So that's one thing to my favor, which you need to keep track of. So let's read up what the Pentagon says here. The process of creating societal rifts to expand existing divisions and to generate self-destructive behaviors was called schismogenesis in 1935. The Office of Strategic Services, an institutional precursor to the Central Intelligence Agency, so basically the CIA before they became more formalized through whatever its law structure came about that formally termed them the CIA, but this is the CIA, used this theory in the South Pacific during World War II to sow disunity among enemy fighters and to create schisms in communities supportive of Japanese rule. So that, all I read there was just this part. I'm going to get to this part in just a second, but I want to make a comment on this first. So there they're saying 1935, right? This is perhaps the year it comes to their awareness as a useful thing to use as a psychological warfare weapon. But in truth, it was a couple years before that, from 1929 through early 1930s, where Gregory Bateson discovered schismogenesis through studying a tribe called the Iapmo. And so he did this in Papua New Guinea. And pay attention to this fact, because this is important. So this was around the time of Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, other people. Psychiatry was around, but it didn't have It didn't have the aspect to it with all of these medications. That's something that developed over time. But you had two competing schools of thought on how to approach issues having to do with uh, people's mental states. So whether it be dementia or whatever somebody was going through. So you had psychiatrists and you had psychologists. Psychologists were more in the vein of the two I mentioned. I'm sure there's others. I'm not a historian, so that's not my point in bringing this up. It's more to set the stage as to what it was that was the popular thinking of what was happening to a person whenever they were exhibiting uh, schizophrenic traits, whenever they were exhibiting psychopathic traits, whenever they were exhibiting autistic traits, which it still wasn't a thing that was formally a diagnosis at the time. But sure enough, there must have been autistic people putting those traits out there. So you'd be wondering, wow, what's this? What's that? So you had these competing schools of thought. I'm sure they shared some thoughts in common. Like I said, I'm not a historian, but the point is to set the stage that Gregory Bateson himself, who was not a psychologist and was not a psychiatrist, was nevertheless a very well educated individual who also had colleagues who, in fact, were. So he was able to enhance his own studies through his networking connections back in the UK, back in California, so that he was able to pursue what he learned of this tribe further. So what he learned was of schismogenesis. He saw that since he was familiar with the traits of schizophrenia, since he was familiar with the traits of psychopathy and such in informally as it were, or even professionally, just that he wasn't a practitioner himself. He was an anthropologist. But through that exposure, he was able to recognize that, all right, yeah, I'm here to study this tribe and study their habits and see what they do, and that's really the purpose here. But I see something else at play psychologically. And what he saw was schismogenesis in effect. He could see the interplay in the back and forth in the way that the men and the women communicated with each other that were triggering in each of them respectively the symptomatic traits that we then associate with those conditions. So it was a feedback loop, and he kept observing this back and forth process go about, and it was his hypothesis that this ritual that the Yamu people had that was called the Navin. So they had this it's not just a coming of age thing. It's more like a reward ritual for whenever one of the men made a contribution to the tribe of note, they would get this reward ritual, and they would have to they would all get to participate. So the women and the men with all their differences and all the clans, and this clan was very, or this tribe rather, and this clan specifically was very violent. So that was part of their culture. So this Nabin ritual was one of these things where you set all problems aside. So everyone comes together and you're celebrating uh, this moment. So Gregory Bateson felt, and I think accurately so, that this functioned as I think the word is a catharsis. So it was a release for all the tension that was setting people apart, because a lot of their interactions were of a violent nature. So it literally was a matter of life and death in terms of some of the relationships within the tribe itself. And in reality, over really petty stuff in some cases. But all that being said, when Gregory Bateson discovered schismogenesis, he realized that, you know what, maybe there's something that back home, all of these professionals in the field of psychology and psychiatry, which really weren't really well developed at the time. So what you have is a lot of new ideas forming. So he was saying, well, I think this process is having an effect. So you have those, and this is generally in the psychiatric field, that believe that these things are genetic in nature, and by these things specifically, I'm referring to autism. I'm referring to ADHD, OCD, uh, psychopathy, sociopathy, narcissism, um, schizophrenia, bipolarity. All of these conditions and so many more are the product of dealing with schismogenesis and having to adapt to it. Because when you're exposed to this process for long enough, continuously, frequently, for whatever reason, you have to adapt your behavior. You have to adapt your perception. You have to adapt your thinking. So that adaptation itself creates all sorts of vicious cycles that reinforce schismogenesis. So it takes off in one direction or another. The direction it takes often is what we then call autism or schizophrenia or psychopathy or narcissism or what have you. And these happen along a spectrum. So I'm going to give you an example. So if you have, and this is just a quick breakdown of why it is you would have one condition versus another. So if you are more prone to detecting and avoiding the stressors in your environment, and these stressors could be both real and misperceptions or a combination thereof. If you're more prone to detecting and avoiding stressors because this is an option that's available to you and you make use of, well, you're going to develop symptoms of autism over time. And later I'll get into why that's the case. If it's not obvious, if you instead deal with stressors in your environment primarily, so not exclusively, but primarily by escaping through your imagination, so that you're employing your thinking a lot, you're employing your ability to create scenarios, to ruminate on them, to run them over again and again, to run simulations, to break them down in their parts, such that essentially, without even realizing it, in the course of doing this, this is how you escape stress, and the stress is frequent and often such that you're finding yourself having to do this again and again. You're in effect training yourself. You're training your imagination. So now your imagination gets stronger. If your imagination gets too strong, it can supplant the reality in front of you so that you get symptoms of schizophrenia. And this can reinforce itself over time in so many ways. And that's its own conversation. So I'll set that aside to move on to the next one. With psychopathy, you're dealing with stress in a different way. And again, you can combine this, and we all do all the time. So there's no human being. I don't think this is an extreme statement. I don't think there's any human being that hasn't at one time or another, and doesn't on a regular basis, detect and avoid stressors. We all do that. So if you do that too often, too frequently, and this is how you employ getting through traversing stress in your life, well, then that's where it gets out of control. It can develop into autism. And same thing with escaping through your imagination. We all escape through our imaginations at one point or another. You could be having a terrible conversation with someone and imagining the piece of cake you're going to have when you go home, or whatever it is. So we all use these adaptations as regular, normal mental functions, because in effect that's what they are. It's just that an excessive application of them creates vicious cycles with compounding effects that we then call autism, we then call schizophrenia, we then call psychopathy, etc. And they all function along a spectrum. So with psychopathy, you're dealing with stressors by deconstruction. You're deconstructing events. You're deconstructing your emotions. You're downplaying them. So you're minimizing a lot. You're trying to confront things in a logical, cold manner, which doesn't mean evil, but it just means just what are the facts here? What are the facts there? How do they connect? And you're basically trying to diminish the emotional experience of it. And of course, if you do that too often, too long, too frequently, well, that can get out of hand. All of these can spiral out. So you can definitely end up on the far end of the spectrum, and many people do. But most people fall along somewhere along the spectrum with one of these or the other. So everyone to some extent engages in behaviors like masking. Everyone engages in routines. Everyone engages in routines, but everyone engages in rituals, and these things are normal. It's my view that part of what distresses people with autism is that they can pick up on a lot of these patterns, and they make interactions seem artificial, as in fake, as in rehearsed, as in, well, why should I take this seriously when it's just a mirage of an interaction. It's not the real thing. But that's a judgment call, and that could be a fair judgment call in a case, or it could be an unfair judgment call. But I'm gonna take a sip from this real quick. I'm gonna take a toke from that as well, and we're gonna move on to the second part of this poster, which is right here. So basically, right here, the military very quickly. I mean, I'm impressed, to be honest with you. Very quickly, they saw the functionality of schismogenesis as a weapon shortly after its discovery. So that had a very bad effect. That had a very bad effect for the general population uh, in the West, and certainly worldwide, because this has been exploited throughout the world by many different governments. And it's that the use of schismogenesis as a as a weapon of war, as a psyops weapon that is effective, and you can judge its effectiveness for yourself. But the use of this has necessitated, as a fact, the misdirection as to the true answer to the questions as to what is it that causes schizophrenia? What is it that causes psychopathy? What is it that causes autism? What is it that causes all of these things? So we've been funding with our tax dollars to the tune of billions of dollars, thousands of studies trying to link genes to autism, for example, trying to link genes to schizophrenia, trying to link all of these red herrings. This is what it is. Think of it logically. So you could say, oh well, that's a cute conspiracy, but no, think of it logically. If you intend to keep this as a weapon, you cannot tell the public what it is. You cannot tell the public its effects. You cannot tell the public what it is that it does. You don't think that the people at the intelligence agencies and at the Pentagon, you don't think they're they're aware of the fact that these are open questions in the medical community and in the science community as to how it is that these things come about. Like, think of it logically. Clearly, it's something that's meant to be kept hidden in order to be able to be exploitable. So you can't share it. So that means that we've been funding to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. When you do the math throughout the years, realistically, these are our tax dollars. When you do the math, tens of billions of dollars every year chasing all these genetic ghosts, I call them, that are supposed to bring about an answer to things like autism and to things like schizophrenia. So anyway, so what is the schismogenesis COVID connection? What is this connection? Let's move on to paragraph 2. It says, likewise, and again, just to reiterate, this is from, excuse me, the U.S. Army War College Quarterly, Parameters, Volume 48, and it's the Article 4 for December 1st of 2018, and it has a sub title to it that I think is worth mentioning along with the authors. So it's called Social Media Warriors Leveraging a New Battlescape, and the authors are I'm hoping I'm saying this right, Budika V. Yayamaha and Yahara Matisek. So the second paragraph says this. And by the way, the report is worth its own read. I'll link to it in this video. I will say this, I don't, it's my telling you to read this is not an endorsement of all the conclusions in the report. And there's something very specifically that I 100% disagree with the authors here. I'm from, remember, this is just two individuals, so don't take what they're saying as gospel. Let the facts speak for themselves. But they do have policy suggestions or things that they offer up as ideas on how to deal with schismogenesis. So I don't want to say that I endorse that. What I do agree with them is well, the simple history of its use, first of all, and the fact that it's being used right now by, just as they say right here, likewise, the recent rise of extremist politics in the United States and in Western Europe provides growing evidence that schismogenesis appears to have been fueled by Russia, China, and numerous other hostile actors. I added this myself in brackets and I put traitors. So when they say numerous other hostile actors, they're talking about smaller nations, they're talking about foreign adversaries, but they're also talking about traitors internally. And let me try to get into the camera here so that you guys can see me explain this. We're at a crossroads right now. I've been telling you we're in the singularity. We are at that moment now. So all across the world, you have the biggest governments that can't go into an all-out war. They can't go into a hot war because it would be absolutely catastrophic for everyone. So what they're doing is they're trying to go all in by taking down their modes of government. And China and Russia have made an effort to destroy this country, not just to disturb us. It's not for revenge. It's not a petty thing. They're literally trying to destroy this country by provoking a civil conflict in order to be able to gain the upper hand with artificial intelligence, with AI. So that's part of the bigger picture, and we'll speak on that in a little bit. But the numerous other hostile actors are within as well. So both the Republican and Democratic parties are corrupt. They're beyond compromise. They're super compromised. So let me read the rest of this so this can make sense to you, and I'll move to this other point. It says, and numerous other hostile actors who can benefit from the cost-effective method of weakening the rules-based international order without directly confronting the West. There it tells you what I just said. They don't want a direct confrontation. It's not going to be to their favorites. It wouldn't even be to our favor. It would basically contradict the whole purpose of any attack in the first place if everybody basically just loses out in the end. So what they want is something to reign over. So they want to keep things intact while at the same time provoking an internal collapse. So let's read this other part of it that is also part of the same report. It says growing evidence also indicates Russian support of various civil society groups in the United States, such as an anti-fracking group and the National Rifle Association. Such actions by Russia, seemingly to protect the environment and support constitutional gun rights, are not virtuous. Instead, supporting the anti-fracking group protects Russia's economic interests, and supporting the NRA allows Russia and other authoritarian governments to paint American democracy as a dangerous experiment that should not be emulated. China and Russia likely find it in their national interest to fund and to support this is schismogenesis, controversial civil society groups for the purpose of exacerbating societal tension and violence, which fits the motto of schismogenesis. This practice has been best exemplified by Russian troll farms creating seemingly homegrown movements that center on unarmed black men, dealing pay attention to this. I'm going to read this again. I apologize. I kind of messed up there. But this is real good to pay attention to because it predates a big national event. So it says, this practice has been best exemplified by Russian troll farms creating seemingly homegrown movements that center on unarmed black men being shot by police and include one sham group cheering police actions and another protesting them. So remember, the date of this was December 1st, 2018. So if you remember that very famous incident, which we all do, with George Floyd, this report preceded it. And it speaks of the very dangers that were experienced from the George Floyd, I don't know what you want to call it. It's a clearly this guy killed him. Clearly he was found guilty. He's guilty of it. So through this incident, it was used to further schismogenesis. So these things happen. Corrupt cops exist. Corrupt cops are real. Non-corrupt cops are real too. You can make that its own separate debate and turn it into its own thing. But the fact is that they're using these incidents to heighten tension, to divide us, to destroy us, to cause us to artificially go just all out on each other. That's the goal. Remember, let's think of that critically. If that were to happen, there would be a level of chaos that would destroy. Think of the consequences. Because people focus on, well, I'm ready for this. It's okay, well, whatever. Listen, everyone can get ready when they need to get ready. Everyone can do what they need to do. Everyone will try to do what they need to do. But this isn't a game. And that's not the end goal. That not only is it not the end goal, it is the lamest result. Because we are at the door. We are at the door right now to the future. We are at the door to a level of existence that few people can even comprehend at the moment. So whether we make it or not, whether we make it or not to that point, depends entirely on how we deal with this moment. This is the moment right now that determines our fate. So if we survive it, we survive well into the future. If we don't, This is the destruction of all mankind. All mankind. Now, why specifically all mankind if it seems like it just be something that happens here? That's its own separate video. Suffice it to say, you all lose. Nobody wins. So, but this is what's happening and why it's happening. When you think of the government of the United States, when you think of the government of Iran, when you think of the government of Venezuela, of France, of the UK, of Russia, of Korea, of whatever country you want, realize that at the top, what we're dealing with are people that have, and through various, in many cases, very illegitimate means, have cornered power, have have silenced opposition, have made it their mode of life to just seek ever and ever and ever more influence, to the detriment generally of others. And this is what describes most of these groups. And whatever the mode of government, the people at the top tend to be very self-serving, self-preserving, self-interested, connected. So they protect themselves amongst each other, the powerful do. And you necessarily and others and all other populations worldwide, we're not the priority. So generally things get better through popular movements and historians, and I'm sure there's some good channels, none of which I'm familiar with, but if you look them up, you can find some great connections where you can see how these laws that favor our freedoms, that favor our rights, weren't merely given to us. So whenever we hear that battles were fought, that blood has been lost, listen, that stuff is true. That stuff is true in a big way. And if you don't pay attention, you lose it. And that has to happen again. Then you have to go again through that process to get back that power. So one of the clever ways these people at the top stay in power is they shuffle the board. They shuffle the board to whatever they need to for them to stay in control. So if people want to go with this, well then okay, we're going to go with that. Go with this where they won't expose us and take us out of control. Well then we'll give them that one thing. If it seems like they're really going to fight for that thing, well we'll have to quash it if it takes away from our power too much. But if it doesn't, we'll grant them this and take this other thing away. So they always have tricks. Look at the NSA. The NSA is the most unconstitutional madness on the planet. It is literally a dictator's wet dream. It can it's currently being abused in so many ways. In so many ways, it's gonna destroy people's futures. It's gonna destroy their livelihoods. It's basically, I call it the neo-Stasi agency. It's basically as Hitler's wet dream. He if Hitler had an NSA, that would have been it. That would have been it. That if Stalin had the NSA, that would have been it. You wouldn't need much more. But these people aim for absolute control, and they're consolidating factions. So there's been a lot of divisions across the world amongst the elites, but now there's a unifying cause that's brought them to all sorts of agreements that they themselves wouldn't have espoused, even with their true feelings on things behind the scenes being whatever they might be. And by that I mean that, for example, you can get a politician that really doesn't give a crap one way or the other about one thing, but if it gets them what they need, they'll go ahead and do it, just to placate whatever the cause is. So it's not something that's heartfelt all the time, and frankly, not all the time would it need to be if it's representative government. But our representative government in America is not representative at all. It's representative in title at this point. These people have been looking out for themselves in the open, and now they're doing it in a way that's outright violent towards our psyches in a way that it hasn't been before, and it has been violent before. Uh, their segregation was state sponsored. That was horrific in its effects. So there's all sorts of ways in which governments basically, it's a word that in a sense minimizes it, but messes with the average person. And this is to keep us disunited, working against each other, uh, trying to simply serve ourselves in whatever it is we do. And at the same time, it seeks to make us go into extremes for one cause or another. Because so long as we're impassioned and not critical, we can be easily manipulated by one faction or another. And all that being said, I didn't mean to get too preachy, but I will tell you about these two and how it is that they fit with Schismogenesis here. So if you're getting this report, think of this logically. Think of this logically. So never mind how you feel politically for either of these people, for their parties, for their policies, whatever. We're only facing this question, Schismogenesis. So if you're one of these elected officials in a very prominent position, obviously if you're in the case of Donald Trump, you would have been the president at the time when this report came out. You're the president. So this is hitting your desk. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's at the height of her popularity. She's a highly educated individual, super, super smart. She understands this is plain English. She would get it. He would get it. No one would be confused. The report, it has great clarity to it. The implications are clear. It's saying what's going on in clear terms. So if you're one of these two people, both of them highly intelligent, you can think whatever you want of Donald Trump. He's a highly intelligent individual. So you have these two highly intelligent individuals receiving this report from the Pentagon, and whatever addendum goes to that, because I'm sure that there's classified parts that were put out in the public. So this is the public face of at least that report. I don't know if it goes longer, but I'm sure there's other intelligence aside. So they're getting this, which is enough to understand the dangers of this process. They're getting this report, and what do? They do the complete opposite of what it calls for. So we got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez constantly promoting division on one subject or another. She's basically is piggybacking one cause after another to covertly bring about her ideal of communism. And so that's its own video. You should check out my own video, my other videos on that. She's a covert communist. You can feel. I was rooting for her. I thought so many positive things about her, and I still do it in terms of her. In terms of, I can respect a smart person when I see one, but she's also a covert communist, and she's highly dishonest about it. So she's always deflecting, always accusing those who bring it up as being white supremacists. I'm a Puerto Rican like she is. I'm clearly not a white supremacist. I'm telling you, she's a covert communist. So if you read the About Us page on the Democratic Socialists of America website, go to the second About Us page, you'll see what I mean. There's two of them. It's just 1984 doublespeak throughout. It's just communist propaganda. It's a lot of communist nonsense. But she won't come out and say it. And what she does nonstop is promote schismogenesis. So You're getting this report. You're either ignoring it, which is a problem. You're not understanding it, perhaps, which is a problem. You're not getting this report, which is a problem. Something's going on. There's an incredible disconnect that you would be promoting schismogenesis nonstop if you care about the people. You'd be trying to calm tensions, not constantly exacerbate things, not constantly turn every social justice cause as to it has to happen now, right now, this way, no compromise. This is another thing I fight over. Like, take it easy, take it down a notch, slow it down. Let's figure this thing out. Society's not collapsing. So if we're going through all these things on top of the pressure of dealing with COVID, which I'm going to explain why it's a bioweapon in just a second. So we're going through all this, and on top of it, you're going to constantly be inflaming tensions and doing the opposite of what this report calls for. That calls your loyalty to this country on both sides into question. If you ask me, that calls into question your oath of office. So you have her doing that. You have Donald Trump nonstop creating issues through Twitter. That's basically every day. So you're getting this report saying, listen, that's what we don't want. But you're constantly adding tension. And this is the thing, is that both sides will make themselves to be the heroes of the people. So they'll both do one thing or another that seems good, that you feel like, yeah, they gotta be the good guy. They gotta be the good guy because they're doing this, they're doing that. But think of the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that these are factions seeking total control. Once they have it, once Donald Trump gets control, if he were to have his way, he'd be a fascist dictator. That's my view of it. That's what Donald Trump would want to be. In Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's world, we'd all be living in a communist paradise in which she makes all the decisions and calls it a commune, but in which people like her live the high life, and very few else actually participate in this. So the communism is the most vile form of government man has ever conceived in its actual effects, and what it promises. It's awesome. I mean, listen. If the promise were as easy as they make it, if the promise were real in the first place, none of it is. It's complete bullshit. It's practiced bullshit. So it's in place. We have real world examples, and no more than you would give Nazism a second try after killing all these dozens of millions of people, should you consider communism ever. So communism has killed over 100 million people. By some estimates, as high as 140 million. Some people will tell you, no, it's only 65 million. Oh, okay, so only 65. Communism is a mass murder machine. How you know that's true is do the simple thought. So I'm not into communism. I would not be a willing participant in a commune. So what do you do with me? What do you do with people like me? You'd have to do something oddly violent, would you not? So that right there would prove that communism doesn't work, because you gotta get rid of everyone that doesn't go along with it. So it's inherently a violent system. It's a lie from the very start. It's a lie from the very start. So that's this poster. Let's get back to the other one. Now let's get back to my talk, because in reality, I don't recall having talked at all. So I'm doing something new here. It's not. I've done it before, but by new, I guess I mean I'll be trying to incorporate it going forward, where I'm wrapping the leaf on the thing and putting it, smoking it like that instead of just putting it this straight leaf. All right. So this poster, which I have to rework the colors to make it more legible, but this poster gives you a breakdown. And here's a closer version of it. All right. This poster is called Schismogenesis. Know the game, don't get played. So if you're unaware that schismogenesis is being used on you, you're going to be more easily manipulated. You're going to be more susceptible to other people's opinions. You're going to be less assertive. You're going to be more, more full of self-doubt. These are effects that happen. You're going to feel more lethargic. You're going to have mental fog. You're going to experience a lot of, curiously enough, symptoms that were described as symptoms of COVID are coincidentally, let's just say, symptoms of schismogenesis. And in my mind, it's no coincidence that COVID enhances schismogenesis. So we already know as a fact, according to our intelligence agencies, according to the Pentagon, that the Chinese government, along with the Russian actors, along with the others, but the Chinese government is attacking us actively right now through this process of schismogenesis. So we're already under hostile circumstances with them. We also know that we're now coming to our wits collectively, and it's about time that this thing is linked to this lab in Wuhan, which is the most logical thing. So it's a coronavirus. There were scientists early on that spoke of its, and I'm no virologist, I'm no expert in viruses, so I have no expertise. I'm only communicating in that respect information that I've read, that I've heard from sources that you don't have to take my word on it, but I trusted at their veracity. And basically what they said is that the virus itself showed traces of being artificial. Now, how it is that they determine that, you would have to go to the experts for them to explain it. But what we do know is that there was a corona lab there that dealt specifically with coronaviruses in Wuhan, and this is where the whole thing started. So now it's being called a leak. You'd have to call it a leak if you wanted to use it as a bioweapon, but couldn't do so openly. Let's just keep that clear. So why would you want to use it as a bioweapon? How would it enhance this process of schismogenesis? Well, think of all the things that have to happen and that happen as a consequence of having to deal with COVID-19 itself. We've all had to find ourselves in isolation. All right? So isolation is a variable that amplifies the feedback loop of schismogenesis. So isolation is one of these variables that's in autism, that features heavily in autism. And it's part of what amplifies the schismogenic effects of autism, isolation. So you're basically creating autistic symptoms in the population through this process. You're creating as you go along, because this depends how the person deals with it. So some people in isolation, they'll go nuts. Some people can't take it. Some people need the company. Some people need the activity. Some people need something to do. They need something to keep their attention. Or maybe there's just stuff they don't want to deal with at home. Maybe that being at home is not comfortable for one reason or another. So being isolated is more stressful, more so than anything. These people would be going through constant schismogenesis. And even the people that prefer the isolation or who find benefit from it would experience the effects of schismogenesis, because isolation amplifies other variables. It brings other variables into effect. So one of the variables that it brings into effect in the case of autism is that if you're isolated for too long, especially during the age of your development, when you're learning how to speak, when you're learning how to deal with others, when you're learning how to interact, when you're learning how to socialize, in fact, if you find yourself isolated, well, naturally those things aren't happening. So your social fluency diminishes. If your social fluency diminishes, what happens? well, you're going to find yourself isolated more frequently, more often, as a natural consequence of that. Why? Because your social fluency is not great. If your social fluency isn't great, and along with that, you find yourself isolated, more so than the typical person, let's just say, well, your social influence is going to diminish. If your social influence diminishes, so does your social networking. So does your social mobility. So does your stability. So does your self confidence. Then become affected. Then that can provoke depression. So you see how that just creates one huge, and even then that small vicious cycle. That in truth and in fairness, and it has to be acknowledged because the entirety of the story of autism or schizophrenia or psychopathy or what have you isn't all sadness and gloom. In truth, this is creating all sorts of feedback loops that do have very, I want to be careful with the word I'm using here. I want to be careful using the word positive because it could get confused with positive feedback loop. I don't like using the term positive feedback loop. When I refer to a feedback loop, I will tell you it's either amplifying or decaying. So it's coming into its existence is broadening and growing, or its existence is diminishing, and so that doesn't get confused with good or bad uh, either. So, but you get all sorts of feedback loops that are of a constructive nature. So, for example, if you're isolated, sure enough, yeah, your social fluency could be suffering, but maybe you're learning how to do math on another level that most people don't know how to do. Maybe you're tackling an instrument with a greater passion that soothes you in the boredom that soothes the isolation that then brings about these creative masterpiece that everyone consumes. It can be a combination of these things to different extremes along the spectrum for each one, but it's not all gloom and doom. It's not all a terrible outlook. However, it does have to be acknowledged that these inhibitions, in a very real sense, when taken to some extreme, can be very detrimental to the quality of your life, to the quality of your relationship, to the quality of your lifestyle, to your ability to bring about the things you want to accomplish. So if you, for example, uh, are experiencing symptoms of isolation and you need that connection, and now your social skills aren't great, well, then that's promoting schismogenesis in you. Instability. I'm trying to move this to the other. Instability. Obviously, this whole COVID thing has created great instability. One of the things that promotes schismogenesis is instability. Instability is a snack for schismogenesis. When you think of schismogenesis, and you don't have to take my word for it, but I had a visualization of what schismogenesis might look like uh, if I were to able to bring it into this dimension. So it's a feedback loop that's trans-dimensional in a very real sense. So it depends on real persons, real things, real places, situations. But this feedback loop structure, and I don't want to make this video about this, but functions as its own entity. It functions as its own system that is seeking information and creating information patterns that are not of benefit to you in very large part, but which keep this system alive. So one of the things that the schismogenesis feeds off of is instability. It's a snack, it's a goodie. It loves instability. So isolation and stability, if it keeps you alone, isolated, that means your thoughts are going to be running again and again, rumination. So all sorts of things can happen. Remember how I told you you get vicious and virtuous cycles interconnected? That's one of them. So rumination is all sorts of trouble because you're just running scenarios again in your mind again and again. Oh, I could have done this way. oh man, why didn't I take that chance? Oh wow, that was so good. Whatever the reason that you're just running these scenarios again and again, autobiographically, things having to do with your interactions. One effect is that one, you could be restructuring your own memories and not even realize it. Two, you could be running your memories in a way that's making them stronger and coding them more vividly, so that when you remember them in the future, you can recall them with a lot more detail in a way that the average person wouldn't. So that you get the vicious and the virtuous cycles feeding off of each other and reinforcing each other's existence. But schismogenesis loves instability. Schismogenesis loves tension. What has happened with all this tension? That's why I'm telling you, don't trust the Republicans. Don't trust the Democrats. They're the last thing that they should have been doing after this report. Because after this report, in my mind, there's just no excuse. Sure, I've been on the internet warning on this prior to that report, but really, do I expect Trump and Pelosi or I'm sorry, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to be looking at my channel to find themselves informed on skis? No, that's not realistic. But you're getting a report from the Pentagon telling you, hey, this very serious, specific process has degenerative results on a person's brain, on a person's mind, on a person's mental state. And it's very real because we've used it ourselves. So we have to tap this down and recognize this danger for what it is. And not one time, and this, I can't even explain this to myself, not one time has a single politician from either party come on and use this word. Not one time. Not one time. Not one time has Ted Cruz come out and said, hey guys, we need to be aware of schismogenesis. Schismogenesis, it's not just divide and conquer. They're really running this psychological warfare thing on us in a very specific way. And this is what it does. So nobody's coming out and saying that because they're the ones using it themselves. They're the ones amping tension. So this is the upper echelons of society who favor themselves above all others, essentially trying to make us self-destruct. So when one side is promoting tension, the other side loves it. They're both happy. If they're both constantly at that tug of war play of instability, they love that. So they're really looking to amplify tension. Low affect. This is where this COVID connection is stronger. So one of the things that keep people in autistic cycles and such is that they have low affect, so that they don't use their expressiveness as much as they could or would benefit them to. So that when you're communicating with another person, we all have different modes of expressiveness. We all express to a different degree with different people. But if you engage with someone and consistently as a matter of routine, most of your interactions consist of you having an unaffected face, unaffected expression. So where you're not really giving anything back to the other party. Well, you're going to find yourself encountering more communication breakdowns than the average person, because there's going to be miscues. There's going to be someone not even knowing how to approach you, not even knowing what you're thinking on how you're taking something that's being said or communicated or whatever. So this can basically amplify the schismogenesis that promotes this feedback loop. So that's COVID. How is it COVID? With a mask. So we got to wear that mask all the time. So wow, so we got to be isolated. There's going to be all this instability. You're going to argue for months about sending out much needed aid to people. And you're going to go back and forth. You're going to do one party is going to accuse the other of treason like it's nothing, and the other one's going to do it too. You're going to both argue over election security and play games with it in all sorts of ways, both sides. And really, you don't think that's aiding this process of schismogenesis as you're all doing that? Really? So then we have fear mongering. Well, what have they done nonstop? So you're receiving these intelligence reports. Do you really want to be promoting all this fear? And to this, I'll give Trump great credit, actually, because very early on in the COVID thing, he was combating fear. He was trying to combat this fear, and he was warning on the catastrophic results of shutting down an economy in the way that we did. What he should have been saying is, hey, listen, this schismogenesis thing is going to be aided by this shutdown. But neither side wants to admit to the existence of schismogenesis because they both depend on it for their schemes, for their political schemes. So they both constantly use it. And if it comes into general awareness where conservatives are aware, where liberals are aware, where woke are aware, whatever you want to call yourself, however you label yourself, however you're labeled by others, when most people become aware of this schismogenic process, what's going to come into play is that everyone's consciousness is going to elevate. And everyone is going to see the level of manipulation that has been put into effect on them for all these years, for all these decades. So that's why neither side wants to come out and use this word. That's why neither side wants to come out and say it. Because then AOC is going to have to answer for how it is that getting these reports about schismogenesis, she's promoting tension all day. Trump is going to have to do the same. Listen, you're the president. Listen, all your theatrics aside, we get it. You still have a responsibility. You're there as the president, and you're going to be promoting all this constant bickering all day back and forth, creating all these tensions. Nah, come on. Let's look at it for real. Over scrutiny. So now they want to constantly surveil us because their errors, their misjudgments, their corruption, their inability to foresee problems, issues, situations, that comes back to us, and now we're told, well, we need to be scrutinized further. So that means your computers, your documents, what you're up to, your medical records. They want more oversight over us because of their ineptitude, because of their criminality, quite frankly. So one thing I encourage people always is never ever label these people incompetent. Incompetence has nothing to do with it. You don't attain these levels of power through incompetence on any side. And to their credit, these people are heavily psychopathic skewed along the spectrum fairly to them. So that's not to say that these people are out there running like Ted Bundy psychopaths and such. But the people seeking power in governments worldwide, including ours, tend to be heavily narcissistic, tend to be heavily sociopathic, and in some cases, psychopathic. And in a sense, you have to be able to navigate these environments, to be able to succeed in them, to be able to outmaneuver your opponents that can come at you in some very dirty, serious ways. So that's part of the thing. But at the end of the day, they still answer to us. And if they feel themselves not having to, or that they don't, or they make you believe they don't, well, that's when their psychic state gets out of control. That's where it can create all sorts of trouble. That's where it does. That's where they're constantly telling us to be fearful, constantly fearful, so over scrutiny, constantly trying to get into our business. Reduced autonomy. Well, what does COVID do? Are they not telling us putting people under lockdowns, putting people under curfews, telling people they can go somewhere? now they're going to play. They're having difficulty implementing since people riled up and people spoke up about it. Now they're trying to pretend that the vaccine passport wasn't a thing, that wasn't an idea. Sure, all the brochures exist. They got all this information set and ready. They talked about it for months, but now they want to pretend like, no, that was all in your head. No, these people have a plan, and the plan is to power, consolidate power for themselves and take it away from you from all sides. That includes most especially, for sure, not most especially, but just for sure as well, the communists on the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Do not be fooled by the lovely things she says, by the empathy she tries to drape over her true intentions, which is to seek control in a communist takeover. It's complete subversion. If your thoughts are that communism's great and everyone should love it, and hey, why aren't we doing this whole commie thing? Well, come out in the open. Come out in the open and discuss it. Don't hide behind accusations of your political opponents being white supremacists when all they're asking us, a fair question is, are you a communist? What are your thoughts on communism? Because your policies, when you look at them fairly in comparison to communism, are communism. So you're mislabeling what it is you're all about. And this is what she's doing. So let's go to uncertainty. We're uncertain about the future. Am I going to go back to school? Am I going to be forced to get a vaccine which goes under a reduced autonomy? Am I going to be able to open up my business? Am I going to get hired? Am I going to get fired? Am I going to be laid off? Are we going back to the office? Are we working from home now? All this uncertainty created by this virus promotes schismogenesis. How does uncertainty play into autism? How does it play into schizophrenia? It's stressful. Everybody knows uncertainty is stressful. So when your critical thinking skills are compromised for whatever reason, and uncertainty is then present, well, that's even more stress. And that then compromises your thinking further, or it has the statistical likelihood of doing so. In other words, that for sure you can overcome things. You can overcome certain patterns of behavior, certain patterns of thinking, certain patterns of being, certain patterns of what have you. But the point of it is that they're hoping that these patterns spiral out of control from you so that you're not able to function and you're not even able to acknowledge your inability or your reduced ability to function as such, because you're caught up in cycles that reduce your ability to judge it. So let's see what this last one is. Censorship. The censorship, first of all, it's the most disgusting thing I have seen. There are so many people that are going to be answering to incredibly powerful and strong legal questions when these things get sorted. Because the level of censorship in this country is bordering on treason. It's not even bordering on treason. It's at a treasonous state. It is aiding and abetting the enemy. So you have people bringing about factual information, anecdotal information, which you still have a right to do, to speak on anecdotal information. You have people expressing firsthand experiences, for example, with vaccines and things like of that nature, which are of public interest, are being censored. You know, the legal liability these companies are creating for themselves with all this censorship, aside from the potential treason charges of aiding and abetting. I think on when it comes to Reddit, I think you have potential treason charges on some level through their leadership. That whole platform is basically schismogenesis central. It exists almost to perpetuate, reinforce, strengthen, and bring about schismogenesis in the worst of ways. It's one echo chamber after another. Information on schismogenesis is actively uh, censored on their platform. I know this because I've attempted for years now to bring schismogenesis to attention, and they permanently banned my accounts for attempting to do so. And they're compromised their ownership by the CCP. The CCP, you're owned by the state in China. They're sympathetic to communism. So, I mean, it's not looking for some of their leadership. It's not looking too good, if you ask me, as far as actual treason charges go. For some of the other tech companies, they're getting close. They're getting close, but for sure they're all there at the point where they're creating incredible legal liabilities for themselves. Incredible legal liabilities for themselves by censoring the truth of people's experience. By sense, if somebody comes out and says, "Hey, wow, my sister just took that vaccine yesterday and she passed away last night," that's just a fact. That's just factual news. That's just one incident in particular. People are then allowed in their minds to make that association and say, "Wow, is there a connection? Is there not?" You can't preempt that thinking by trying to create a particular narrative that says only things work. They're in so much trouble just on that basis alone. But this is the thing with COVID. It's meant to enforce this process, which is the ultimate weapon. This weapon here is a natural process. This natural process, we encounter it all the time. When you have a falling out with someone, when you get off on the wrong foot with someone, that's schismogenesis. Basically, any breakdown in communication is a schismogenesis. And sometimes schismogenesis are what needs to happen for you to move on to a better loop, another loop that is better structured. But this is a weapon. So there's we live in America that allows for debate. It allows for free inquiry. It allows for free thinking. And it allows for the sharing of ideas. That's the whole point of the thing. That's the whole point of this country. And that includes freedom of religion. That includes the ability of people to, if they don't believe, to not have to believe, to not have to believe in anything, or to believe whatever particular thing they want to believe. So we're all beneficiaries of an incredible amount of real human courage, like for real. If you get into the histories of how this country got started, and it's not perfect. It's been abusive to one group or another for sure. I know this. I know this. And but that's not the story of America. That's not the actual story of this country. The story of this country is not the oppression. It's the suppression of oppression. It's the surmounting of oppression. It's that through the Constitution itself, which is not a perfect document, it's not holy grail, but it's basically we hold it and we value it because it's the height of human thinking. It's humans saying we are flawed. We don't get things right on a regular basis. What do we know for sure that we all need to be able to pursue things that we can all be in accord about, like justice? We can all be in accord about of people not just stealing your things, people not of you being able to work and get paid for it. So things of that nature. So just very logical things. that's the high-mindedness of it. It's just to let's bring things down to the basics as to how we make this work. How do we make all these people in this country that's going to keep on growing, and this population that's going to keep on growing, how can we bring them all together? How do we stay together? And how do we stay together stronger? How does that happen over time? So you construct this document that allows for self-improvement, that allows for improvement from within. When you try to escape that process, you endanger yourself. You endanger all the things achieved by this. It's not a mere piece of paper. It's the idea that's encoded there within. It's what keeps us all together in a very real way. I remember giving this guy a ride, right? This was in this was in 2017, in the fall of 2017, right before I discovered the answer to autism, right before I had that epiphany, right before I had that encounter with God. And that's a very sensitive topic because, now listen, I'm not a shining example of anything religious. Like, I'm not a religious person. I'm not a proselytizer. You do your thing completely. When I tell you that God is part of this process, I mean that 100% for real. Like, this Schismogenesis, this is all big. This needs to be news. This needs to be new. Yesterday, this needs to be news. Ask yourself that question. How can it be that this guy on YouTube, as a fact, gave the world the answer to autism? Look what I just did here. I'm going to be presenting this, and I got to be careful because some of it is loose. Look at this. Look at this. This is me detailing, just on social media, just telling people all about autism back in 2018, 2019. This is just from one account. Never mind the papers I took back. Telling people about reality, explaining how things work, warning on schismogenesis. Pages after pages of comments, never mind the ones that got removed by moderators. They judged my theory as inaccurate, my theory that now has been proven by recent studies. That's just that account. There's another account I'm printing. This is Nano Juggernaut. I'm going to make all of these files, all of these Reddit conversations, I'm going to make them available on my website. I'm going to link to them. You'll be able to go through them yourself. So at a minimum, I'm giving you the answer to autism, and then it's being proved correct. I'm giving the answer to reality. Think of that. Think of that in real terms. To reality in precise, simple, clear terms. I'm not trying to impress people with language. I'm not trying to obfuscate one aspect or another. I'm saying this is how it works. It's connected like this. It appears to do this because of this. This happens. Gravity is this. The mind-body problem is this. I answer several big questions together. And how are you able then to judge that as correct? Well, you can say, well, wow, this guy did say it all the way then, as proven by timestamps, that you can't fabricate timestamps on the internet. Things that are there that are concrete that you could check out for yourself. And you say, so this person did two things. So they brought the answer to autism and reality, and the answer that they gave to reality is now being repeated by figures in the physics community. That you then have to say, wow, what's going on here? How's this guy doing this? How's this guy doing all this? How did this person warn us against schismogenesis before the Pentagon? How is this one person doing this? I'm going to give you the answer. I'm not going to keep it secret. The answer is that it all happened because God gave me these answers. At the same time, this was on December 4th of 2017, and it was through a process. So there was a process that led to it, that then led to that moment that resulted from that conversation. And then there was a period of weeks that followed where now I had to bring the connections that he had placed all in my mind. But listen, I'm telling you, it would be easier for me. It would be easier for me to just say, well, listen, I can prove this as a fact. This is a fact. Why even bring God into the equation? Why even do it? Why even complicate the issue when I know that's all that's going to do is it's going to turn off a lot of people that don't want to hear anything like that. And I have no motive because I'm not proselytizing. Like I'm not. I don't care. Like it doesn't mean anything to me. So why would I complicate things if that weren't the case? I'm telling you, this is how things happen, and you need to understand that for a reason because the reality as you see it is not what it seems. So you're being sold this false narrative that so with this this is me gaining credibility. This is a tool by which to gain credibility with you for you to then examine the other things I say, not to take them at face value, but to then say, wow, this person got these major things right, which should be on the news. We should be like, what the heck is this? This should be on the news. So this person, they got this thing right. Let me hear the next thing they have to say, and let me look into it. That's all. That's where I'm coming at with this. So what I'm saying to you is this: the reality you perceive is not a simulation. The idea of a simulation is a hoax. It's another hoax perpetrated by the science community. So I need you to understand and not be as naive as I was, and to believe in that the science community is this incorruptible force for good that would never do any harm. Just think of this whole most recent COVID thing. Like you have newspapers hiding the fact that they called it a crazy conspiracy theory for COVID to have come from the lab in Wuhan. And now that it's coming into the emails are being shown, the connections are being made more concrete. The obvious question, which was a fair question at the time, is now being rebranded as, oh, we didn't know. Who could have thought? Yeah, the people that mentioned it, the people that mentioned they could have thought. That's the people you ignored, the people you labeled as quacks. So these people are very disingenuous. Science lies. Science covers its tracks. Science deceives all the time. You get a special interest that funds specific studies. Science for years pushed the lie of cigarettes being healthy. You had literal doctors promoting smoking as something to do, as something that would help you. You have examples of all sorts of terrible medications that were purposely released knowing that they were terrible, so were harm could have literally been prevented and was known to be produced as a result if action wasn't taken. And in other words, criminal actions, literal criminal actions. So trusting science too much, listen, isn't the answer either. Remember, there's in every field it's all people, and people can get corrupt. So there's very special interests. The special interests fund the scientists that say what they want said. So they want this. Sometimes they'll think of all the studies that were funded looking for the answer to autism, to genetics, when the Pentagon knew that was bullshit. Think of it like that. Think of it like that. Like looking for answers to some genetic link to schizophrenia when the Pentagon knows, no, well, actually, we know it's this thing called schismogenesis because that's what Gregory Bateson had pointed out to. And we use it as a weapon, and we use it to break down targets psychologically. So think of all the bunk science that gave you genetic correlations to autism. Thousands. Literally. Literally. Same thing with schizophrenia. Same thing with all of this. So science is like any other field, susceptible to corruption, to mass corruption, to special interests, and to all things of that nature. And I think it's important that people keep that in mind, because one of the things I've seen from all of this, and one of the things that came to me from the conversation I had that whole day, that conversation I had with God, was that the truth of His existence is purposely being hidden. Purposely, you're being walked away. Purposely, you're being told that He's a malevolent character, that He's not true. So He's both malevolent and not real. So that they want you to have it both ways. This is an authoritarian. This is, sure, it's a complete contradiction when you examine that by itself too. You cannot have this omnipotent being who is this authoritarian, according to those who would say so, who at the same time allows you to be free, to do as you will, to do as you please, to do ultimately as you decide. In other words, to enact your own free will. So then we can get mad at such a character by saying, well, how do you let these bad things happen? Well, these other people have free will too. So they're doing what they want with their free will. I can't have one special rule for you, but it's free will for all those who seek it. And many will misuse it as such, which we all do. We all misuse it in so many ways, in so many ways self-serving, in so many ways not intentionally even trying to be cruel, but that regardless is always in effect through every interaction, the end result, where you create an incredible amount of suffering. And in another video, I'll get into how it is that that's the case. But none of that's to say that you should feel bad, because however you feel is up to you. All I'm telling you is that this is true. These are the things that I experienced in bringing forth to you these answers. This is how these things happen. If it happened in a simpler way, I would have said it, and it would have been easier, and things would have been great. But that's just not the thing. So that's not the story that I'll share with you. So another poster that I made, and I think I'll wrap up with this one. It's this one here. Let's see if I can bring it closer so you can see. So I'll read it to you. So obviously Schismogenesis, let's see how good your eyesight is. Schismogenesis up top. Read me this line so that I can classify you as an eagle. Schismogenesis is a stress-inducing, self-amplifying feedback loop process that provokes and reinforces divisions between factions, where the term factions is representative of relationships of whatever nature between any two or more systems of any type, including people, and even between the thoughts a person may hold in their own mind. Prolonged exposure to schismogenic interactions, which tend to flow from a breakdown in communication this very process provokes and reinforces, necessitates adaptive modes of dealing with the resultant stressors in the form of coping mechanisms that serve to counterbalance its effects while paradoxically sustaining them. For example, a shy person withdraws so as to escape unwelcome attention. Their disengagement highlights their presence and draws the very attention of others they withdrew so as to have avoided. They further withdraw, thus making their absence ever more conspicuous, etc. So, reading on this one now, it says, autism, schizophrenia, psychopathy, bipolarity, and narcissism. And I'm going to make a comment on narcissism to close. Autism, schizophrenia, psychopathy, bipolarity, and narcissism, among other perceptual windows or mental states, function as mutual causal feedback loop systems involving more persons than the most obviously affected individual, each of which evolved as an adapted stress response to frequent and or prolonged exposure to schismogenic interactions that result from and provoke a fundamental breakdown in communication between them and those within their sphere. These loops, in part being merely hyperexpressions of normal mental functions, are always complementary, two or more working in tandem along their own spectrum, outside a balanced range, and semi-abstract in nature, such that they involve interconnected thoughts, emotions, behaviors, situations, places, people, objects, etc. Narcissism, better understood as hyper-internal focus along its own spectrum, is always complementary to all other loops, and serves to help sustain them by blinding the individual to the variables they themselves contribute towards each loop. The position a person falls along any given spectrum is in fact the point of relative stasis attained by such cycles when the stressors and the stress responses that characterize these reach a counterbalance or equilibrium. So what I was going to say on narcissism there goes to this one sentence, which I'll repeat here. Narcissism, better understood as hyper-internal focus along its own spectrum, is always complementary to all other loops. Okay, so what am I meaning to say by that? If you have autism, well, you're on the spectrum of narcissism too. And that doesn't mean self-worship, it doesn't mean self-adulation, it doesn't mean extreme self-love. It means hyper-internal focus, which where you're linking. If you have a spectrum of the middle 0, and then it goes here, you're looking outwardly too much, and you're not looking internally enough. Or here, you're looking more internally. Well, autistic individuals are looking more internally along a spectrum, so that if you want to label it narcissism, and narcissism, the label has become so stigmatized that it's almost now useless, unless you're thinking of extreme cases of a person that does indeed is in that state of self-love and self-worship and such. But in this internal state of focus, you get caught up in autistic cycles and in schizophrenic cycles and in psychopathic cycles and all these other feedback loops, because the things you contribute to the process are harder to spot, because narcissism, or this internal focus, sustains itself as a feedback loop by avoiding, in turn, having to deal with contributions you make to these other feedback loop processes. So that you might not want to examine a question, you might not be able to examine a question, you might not even be aware of the need to examine a question. So it can create all sorts of blind spots that reinforces itself while reinforcing these complementary loops, such as autism, psychopathy, bipolarity, schizophrenia, etc. So that's what I wanted to say on that. If you found that useful, please do let me know. I think this is the longest video I've ever put out. Maybe, I don't know. It's pretty long, so let's see how this long format does with you. You tell me, and that'll be it. And if you leave me some feedback, we're gonna talk on artificial intelligence in some videos going forward, so that you can see how artificial intelligence is actively right now being used against you to promote schismogenesis, and how. So all these robots, they got these chatbots, the deep fakes you see in the videos. If you've seen the deep fakes, if you haven't, go look at it so you get creeped out. Deep fakes exist also in profiles. So there's deep fake Twitter profiles where you'll see complete images. You'll see one image or two that reflects what you think is a person, but really all that's intended is to create an impression. So they don't care if one or two people sometimes catch on. So if you catch on that you're talking to a robot, excuse me, if you catch on that you're talking to a robot, well, okay, so what are you going to do? Take it to the police? You're not going to do anything. You can tell I came across this chatbot to someone. And maybe someone will be vaguely interested, but no one's going to do anything about it. So this chatbot that will only rarely seem fake to some people will be having this massive effect out there, whether it gets caught by some one person or not. So you get these chatbots that are given fake deep profiles or deep enough to maintain an illusion. So, for example, there's profiles right here on YouTube that you can find that you'll be having interactions with them, and the conversations will have jokes. They'll be contextual. They'll be back and forths. They'll try to provide a source here. They'll do a typo here and there. Then there'll be a correction, so it'll seem like a real conversation. You open the picture, you see it's a plain CGI. You can see examples of that. And I'm adding to the video, but just to make you aware, artificial intelligence is here. Artificial intelligence is throughout the internet, everywhere. It's putting out massive tension, creating information. It's meant to heighten your attention. It's meant to promote schismogenesis. It's meant to promote disinformation, misinformation, anger. It's meant to rile you up. It's meant to keep you angry. It's meant to keep you engaged with your neighbor in a heated way. So just be aware of that process. Give me your feedback. Tell me if you like this long video. Tell me if you like for me to make more short bites, whatever you're thinking. Bring to the attention of others this issue of schismogenesis. Make this word go viral. Make this word go viral. Make our politicians, make these major name politicians have to answer for why. Make a low level politician. Go ask your mayor today. Mayor, have you ever heard of schismogenesis? Has anything from the chain of command come down on this very specific thing that you could be taking steps in your community to combat? Ask your local governor, your local senators. Ask, and definitely at the federal level, these characters, these Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this Marco Rubio. Bring it to Marco Rubio's attention. Say, Marco Rubio, Senator Rubio, how is it that you have not made us aware of schismogenesis? This very particular process that's used to alter people's mental states. It doesn't just create simple divisions. It affects people's mental health. So this issue of public concern. So we got the CDC telling us one thing about we're all under a psychological attack on a mass scale in this country. Has the CDC made any statement on schismogenesis? No, they have not. So make this word go viral. Make my contributions to medicine, science, and I would say military craft as well go viral. This is very real. Here, my name is Jock Avalis. I solved autism. Make that fact go viral. I will not be ignored. I will not be disappeared. I will not be memory hold. No one's going to be able to subtract this contribution that I made. So let's acknowledge it on time for you, so that this process that they're trying to use with schismogenesis is not used against you as they intend to use it and as they're using it right now. So give me the platform that I need to discuss these issues publicly, to discuss them broadly, so that I can debate these matters with others who would refute them. So another person, you have a right to say, hey, I don't think that way. I don't think that's what's going on. I can back things up, and I will. So give me the platform. I've earned it. I'm claiming it. Give me the platform. I know what to do with it. That's it.